The UN is meeting here in New York City, just a few blocks from this studio, actually. Year in and year out, they snarl traffic and make life in this city unbearable for about a week. Now, it might be worth it if they actually got something done, but they never do. Can you actually think of a single problem that was solved by the UN? Have you ever watched a newscast and thought, boy, am I glad the UN was there? No, you haven't, because the United Nations is comprised of the world's most useless bureaucrats. They're unelected and they're corrupt. Here's a little stat for you. The United States taxpayer covers 27%, almost a third of the total cost of the UN. Now, the next nearest contributor is Japan at 12%, and the contributions just keep going down from there. On the other side, the U.S. taxpayer is on the hook for billions more in foreign aid to third world Islamic countries. And we're supposed to accept their dictates, like on things of freedom of speech? Progressives and Islamists seem to love the UN because both groups are dedicated to some form of global governance, whether it's one giant leviathan or a caliphate. Plus, both groups seem to believe this is our collective destiny. Global government elites are everywhere, including right here in the United States. Remember this ominous line from former President George H.W. Bush?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
It was creepy when he said it the first time, and it's still creepy now. He sounded a lot like former President Woodrow Wilson. Here's a quote from President Wilson's July 10th, 1919 speech on the precursor to the UN, the League of Nations, which was killed in the Senate by guys like Henry Cabot Lodge. And I quote, "It is thus that a new role and new responsibility have come to this great nation that we honor and which we would all wish to lift to yet higher levels of service and achievement. The stage is set, the destiny disclosed. It has come about by no plan of our conceiving, but by the hand of God who led us into this way. And we cannot turn back, we can only go forward." And cannot turn back, only go forward. Where have I heard this line before? Again, at the expense of the American taxpayer. You know, our current president, Mr. Forward himself, seems too busy to meet with the world leaders. Now, I don't know what's worse, turning your back on people like Benjamin Netanyahu while Iran's Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is talking about preemptive strikes against Israel, or joining the chorus of global elites who want global government. By the way, Ahmadinejad, he believes in that New World Order thing, too.
The current world order is discriminatory and based on injustice. Distinguished friends and colleagues, what should be done and what is the way out of the current situation? There is no doubt that the world is in need of a new order and a fresh way of thinking.
You know, these global utopians, they keep extolling the virtue of the United Nations. Like federal spending, its existence is beyond question. But has the UN actually achieved any of its goals? Have they put an end to genocide in Africa? Have they aided in reining in Islamic terrorism? How about women's rights? You know what's amazing about the UN when they issue declarations on issues like women's rights is that they leave it up to the individual countries to define women's rights. So what you end up with is global moral relativism. When the Islamic theocracies agree to something like a charter of women's rights, they think, sure, a woman has the right to not go to school or the right to present 4 male eyewitnesses to bring a charge of rape. They have the right to never leave their home unescorted. Hey, they even have the right to be beaten if their husband is feeling particularly festive. Kind of a different view that we have here when it comes to women's rights. And don't even try getting into that with structural feminists. Do you remember the Iraqi Oil for Food program? That was a Clinton-era program where the world let Saddam Hussein sell Iraqi oil for food and medicine after the first Gulf War. The idea was to keep Hussein from taking the oil profits and spending on his military. Now, who was actually in charge of this multi-billion-dollar effort? Some guy you never heard of from Cyprus named Benan Savan, and he ran the program in total secrecy. Now, the program ended in 2003, and according to the AP in March of 2005, Kojo Annan, the son of UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, received at least $300,000 from a Swiss company that was awarded a contract from the UN Oil for Food program in Iraq, almost double the amount previously disclosed. And according to the Washington Post, senior UN officials hoped the 18-month probe would put an end to the $64 billion program in which investigators found that Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein raked in $1.7 billion in kickbacks and another $11 billion in oil smuggling profits. Meanwhile, U.S. Ambassador John Bolton seized on the reports to advance his case for a greater independent oversight of UN spending to prevent another oil for food scandal. Now, the really funny thing is Kofi Annan maintained he had no idea that his son had been involved in any dirty dealings. Right. Dad didn't know Junior was into this sort of thing. He must be the only kid on earth who got away with a Playboy between the mattress and the box spring. Now, these are just a few examples of what happens under the UN's watch.